Ndu,
Yes.
tell us about World Immunization Week.
Okay, so it didn't start this year. It's a week that's commemorated, year after year, and looking at the importance of immunizing the world's population against certain diseases. And it's been in practice that global citizens are encouraged to get immunized against certain diseases. And we've seen the successes of some of these. Great successes against polio in many European countries many, many years ago. We're looking at decades ago. And then the successful immunization drives that took place on the continent of Africa, countries such as Ghana, Nigeria, for polio, and then essentially saw polio being wiped out of these countries as a result of that. And so World Health Organization and other medical bodies taking this extremely seriously and say that there are a number of diseases around the world that can essentially be wiped out if more and more people were immunized from these. And, they're working on others, looking at a malaria vaccine, for example, looking at some of the newer and more difficult diseases to control, HIV and AIDS, looking at an end to this sometime in the future. Discussions are being had. What we're dealing with today with COVID-19, vaccines are already there. And the message has been to make people safe, have people being safe by getting these vaccinations done. And it has been proven over and over again that if the more people you vaccinate, the higher your chances of eliminating the disease from the world for good. So it's not a matter of just get the vaccine because, we'd like to see if you can get well. But the more and more people are immunized from this, are able to gain and strengthen immunity, the higher the chances of removing these vaccines from existence completely.
The virus.
These diseases rather, from existence completely. So this week is used as commemoration, reminding people of how you can actually be kept safe by being inoculated from these diseases. So this is the week that is commemorated at the final week of April every year, and we're coming to the tail end of it. But messages being sent around the world about the importance.
Yeah. So focusing on COVID and the
Yes.
global COVID vaccination drive, right? We're looking at the success stories from various countries. Israel is up there.
Yes.
In terms of even the percentage of the population that has been vaccinated and that is receiving both doses, the complete dosage of the vaccine, over 50%.
Yeah, I think
by Monday.
The most recent number we saw was 55.3% of the population having been vaccinated. And then also the first time in 10 months that we saw Israel did not report a COVID-19 death. So there's certain things that are being done. On one side, the vaccination end of things. On the other side, the measures that they put in place to really take care of the population when it comes to COVID and how strict they've been on some of these measures, instituting lockdowns, curfews here and there. But it seems to be working and working well.
So why don't we hear the story and the experiences from the horse's mouth? Israeli ambassador to Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Malawi and Seychelles, His Excellency Oded Joseph, joins us on the line again. Good morning, Your Excellency.
Good morning, guys. I'm so happy and pleased to be hosted again in Situation Room. How are you?
Good morning. Fine, thank you.
Thank you for accepting our invitation.
No, I thank you.
Yes.
Oded, a lot has happened since the last time we spoke in terms of looking at the curve, the spread of COVID-19 around the world, wave after wave, some countries going through some tough waves, countries such as yours getting to a point where you have vaccinated so many people. Just tell us about the vaccination drive so far, the latest numbers in terms of vaccination, the latest numbers in terms of those that have tested positive for COVID or hospitalization and such.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, Israel did begin a very, very bold campaign of giving the vaccines to its population. And I'm proud and happy to say that at the moment, the exact figures today are that 62% of the Israeli population is already given the vaccine, the 2 shots of the vaccine. This is 62% from the total population. If you take into consideration the age that is eligible to get the vaccines, we're talking about maybe 75-80% of our population that receives the vaccines. So that has been a very bold campaign. And I'm happy to say that today, when you go to visit Israel, things have opened up. And this is really due to this large amount of the Israeli population that got the vaccine.
In terms of how to's, because I think that there's so many lessons here that can be learned. What exactly was done to make this possible? There's some countries who we're looking at today have to give a payment incentive to their citizens to come out and get vaccinated. There are other countries who just don't have enough in terms of resources to be able to vaccinate 10% of the population. What exactly would you say was done or put in place to make this possible?
Well, I think first and foremost is the recognition of how serious this pandemic is, and Israel has, like every other country, was very much challenged by this pandemic. The number of deaths of Israelis is 6,361 deaths. We are placed 61 in the world in terms of deaths per million people. We are number 14 in the number of positive cases per million of the population. So we have suffered from this pandemic very, very seriously. And I think first and foremost, we recognize how important it is to act quickly. I think what worked for Israel is the three factors. First is that, as I said, our leadership recognized the importance of tackling this challenge. And we have purchased mainly Pfizer vaccines even before it was approved by the FDA. It was shipped to Israel. We took a calculated risk. So the minute the FDA approved the Pfizer vaccine, we had enough vaccines to start beginning this full campaign of giving vaccines to our population. So number one is acting very fast and making sure we have enough vaccines on time. Number two, I think Israel is lucky to have, even before its independence, a very efficient and effective public health system. Mm-hmm. This includes various factors with it. One, we have a law that a compulsory health insurance is needed for every citizen. So there's no citizen in Israel that doesn't have a compulsory health insurance. Mm-hmm. Number two is that the system is digitized. Everything is, from the day you were born, you're getting this sort of a smart card with all the medical information about you. Mm. So the digitized information, having a knowledge for operators, health operators, having all the information needed about its population allowed us to have a very effective campaign. And I think factor number three is that Israel, with all due respect, we're a small country. Our population is only 9 million, so in a very small area. So controlling and giving this campaign of vaccination or exercising a lockdown is much more effective and much more efficient with a smaller population and a smaller area. So it's acting fast, a very effective and efficient public health system, and us being not such a big country with not such a big population.
What has Israel done to assist its neighbors in also attaining the sort of efficacious way of dealing with COVID-19? Is there any program, process that Israel has done? I'm looking at this from the perspective of, if you have neighbors who you interact with and they aren't looked after or they're not able to, then your citizens are also in danger.
Well, absolutely. We have our immediate neighbors are our Palestinian neighbors and the countries that are surrounding us. We have been facilitating whatever is needed in order for them also to receive the right amount of vaccines. We cannot, as part of our agreement with Pfizer and Moderna, we cannot export our vaccines. But those, for example, Palestinians who work in Israel receive vaccine from the government of Israel. So we are cooperating with the health authorities of the Palestinian Authority. We are facilitating whatever is needed in order to make sure that vaccines are being brought to the areas of the Palestinian territories. And as I said, we're also giving vaccines to Palestinians that are working in Israel.
Okay. Apart from taking what you refer to as a calculated risk in purchasing the Pfizer vaccine, did Israel in any way participate in funding the process of development of this particular vaccine?
Yes, we actually have been. We have been contributing also to the research that has been done abroad, and also we are very, very much focused on trying to develop our own vaccine. to be allowed to be transported in a much easier manner. So I think absolutely yes, we are trying. We are part of this worldwide effort to see how we could curb this pandemic.
Well, that leads me to my next question. Has Israel processed or thought of perhaps producing their own vaccine?
Yes, I just mentioned that we are trying. We're trying to develop our own vaccines in our own research institutions. Naturally, the challenge is now to try to find those vaccines that could give an answer to many of the mutations that have been developed. And I think the other challenge is how do you create those a vaccine that is being able to be transported rather easily? Because at the moment, at least the Pfizer vaccine has to, in order to transport it, you truly need to make sure that it's being held in a very, very extreme and delicate circumstances and conditions. So that is a big challenge, and we are trying to develop a vaccine that will be much easier to handle.
In looking at how it is that we take cognizance of this particular pandemic, and we look at people whom we partner with, like, let me give an example of a country that you know well called Kenya, okay? When you consider the relationship that Israel has had with Kenya, and you look at something that is a threat to everyone on this planet, like the COVID-19, are there steps or are there processes of thinking that countries like yours would have when it comes to helping them with a situation like this, when it comes to also ensuring that they have sufficient support to get their citizens vaccinated?
I think there are at least three venues that we are trying to develop a cooperation between Israel and Kenya. And I think it's truly helping each other. This is a worldwide challenge. So I think the first and the very basic venue is talking to each other, sharing experiences, sharing views, sharing practices, how to deal with this pandemic. And we are developing this type of discussion between our public health experts. The second, which is slightly more complicated, but still a venue that we are looking at how we could develop it, that is cooperation in research. And last but not least is when one has the ability to stand and to extend this assistance in terms of PPEs, or in terms of hopefully one day also vaccines. I think this is something that these are three venues we're looking at in terms of our cooperation with Kenya, trying to curb together this challenge.
One of the things that the development of the vaccines has shown is that it's very possible for the world to come together and fight together for something. If you look at the speed with which the development, the research, and up to development of the vaccine took place, if you look at the funding, governments setting aside money, positive things. But currently now, the world is also looking at the very ugly and negative side of such action. This is where the rich versus poor conversation starts coming up, and vaccine nationalism. Countries being accused of hoarding amounts of vaccine that would go to their population 3 times or 4 times over, while poorer countries like those in Africa and other parts of the world don't have access to a single vial of vaccine. What is it that you think Israel could do or is doing in terms of bringing up that conversation to the fore? You live in a region where you also, yes, have neighbors who are not as well endowed economically as you are. How do you deal with that?
Well, first, let me just say that I totally agree with you. There couldn't be a justification for having an uneven distribution of the vaccine. This is a worldwide challenge. This is a pandemic that we all suffer from. So the only way to curb this is really by making sure that all the population around the world deals with this in an effective and efficient manner, and vaccines is definitely one of the main ways. I think it will be easier for Israel to significantly contribute to this once we hope to have our own vaccines. And that would enable us not only to make sure that the production is enough for the local Israeli population, but maybe to expand it to other places in the world. As long as we are dependent ourselves in vaccines that we purchase from abroad, there are certain agreements of what we could do with the vaccines. We're not able to export them. But I think the bottom line is, I totally agree with you. The pandemic has to be challenged worldwide, and it has to be challenged and dealt with in an effective manner, and in a way that everyone has the same right to get what's needed in order to overcome this challenge.
I want to ask you a philosophical question here. I mean, there's what we're saying is something that we all understand, and at least I hope it's understood by all. But at what point does one stop or start looking after the interest of their own population and people, and at what point do they then consider the obligation of helping others a priority?
Wow, philosophical questions at 7 o'clock in the morning is always almost as challenging as overcoming the pandemic. But I think it has to be done in a parallel manner. Naturally, every government has its immediate responsibility to take care of its own population. I think this is only natural, that you first and foremost, it's your responsibility. That's why we elect our governments, and that's what we expect them to do. And in parallel, you have to make sure that you find the ways and the time to cooperate with your friends, with your neighbors, with the other countries in the world in order to fight the pandemic. So I think my answer is really it has to be done in a parallel manner. But also, you must understand that the Israeli government or any other government could not direct other countries what to do. We could cooperate, we could discuss, we could consult, but the authority of a government is only on its own population. So it's not only a matter of just the mandate and expectation that each government will take first and foremost care of its own population, but it's also the mandate of what it's able to do, what it's allowed to do.
That is true, Your Excellency.
How was this answer for 7 o'clock in the morning philosophical question?
You've done very well.
Thank you so much. This is why I like to be hosted by you guys.
That is true, Your Excellency. But the reality of the geopolitical sphere that we live in is that, yes, you can't direct a country, but there's this subtle issue of influence. And it doesn't matter which country one belongs to, even it doesn't matter how friendly one is, but there's always the interplay of influence and how it can be balanced. Now, let me explain why I'm saying this. One of Israel's greatest industries is high technology. Okay, that's aside from agriculture, tourism. Now, one of the things that Kenya could use in bucket loads is an infusion of that high technology, because with the high technology, as you say correctly, you at birth, an Israeli child has their details at one particular spot, and it makes it easy when you want to roll out the sort of rollout that COVID has necessitated. The question, has Israel had any discussions, or if it's top secret and we shouldn't discuss it, you will let me know, but have we as Kenya received, or has Israel offered support in that particular area to Kenya?
If you're talking about generally, cooperating in the field of high tech and
yes.
ICT, naturally we have a great cooperation with Kenya. We want to develop it and to reach higher ends in this regard. We could do much more, but we are already cooperating with Kenya, whether it's on a business-to-business level, and of course also between the governments. I think we could do much more in terms of research. And again, the potential is much higher than what we're doing in practice. But it is a part of our priority. I think it's also the priority of the government of Kenya. And as an ambassador, that's definitely one of the areas where we are looking at how we could do more together. Just to give an example, very, very soon on the 10th of May, with your new and only smart city that you're developing here in Kenya, Konza Technopolis, we will be holding a Shark Tank whereby Israeli startups together with Kenyan startups would be introduced to the challenges of the smart city and smart transportation and smart access and security of the smart city. We would be challenged by Konza Technopolis on what this city wants to develop. And as I said, young creators with innovative minds and with a lot of imagination will be together trying to give answers to some of those challenges. Israeli startups alongside with Kenyan startups. So this is just one example. As I said, we could and we should do much more in terms of cooperation in high tech and innovation.
Are we looking at a world after COVID? Lessons to be learned from COVID, but if are we at the point where you're looking at these partnerships and relations after COVID and all that it has brought with it? Important to do so at this point, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, we truly want to be in that position already of being post-COVID. Let us be there as soon as we can. But I think it did affect the way it impact or the way that we cooperate with other countries. Naturally, much more emphasis is now being done in the field of health and research and innovation. So what we're trying to do is to develop these mechanisms of enhancing the cooperation exactly in these fields.
Ambassador Oded Joseph, we thank you very much again for speaking to us this morning, early morning. Hope to invite you again in the studio soon. I know you've already gotten your 2 doses of COVID vaccine. So
that's true.
Okay.
That's true. We were lucky also as a diplomatic missions of Israel around the world. We were sent specifically to get the vaccines to Israel. So all the staff of the embassy and their families were sent with special planes to Israel twice to get to the 2 vaccines. So yes, we got the vaccines, and we're trying to, like everyone else, to get back to normal life as much as possible.
Does this include the Kenyan staff working at the Israeli embassy?
Well, as I said earlier, unfortunately, we cannot export the vaccine.
Right.
And so we are now looking at how we could take also care of the local staff at the embassy with the Kenyan authorities. Naturally, this is something that is high on our priority.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Speak to you again soon.
Thank you. Have a blessed day. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.